Today's show is brought to you by channel members and patrons alike. To contribute to the show, hit that join button or head over to www.patreon.com/theplothole1. That's the number one, not the loneliest number you could ever do. Rack focus. Hey everybody, Johnny O from the Plot Hole here, and today we're going to take a look at one of the largest pieces of human poo on television. If you said Tucker Carlson, you guessed right. Tucker Carlson is a talking head who has a history of throwing temper tantrums on his show, especially when the guests he invites on don't bow to his opinion. He's borderline racist at times. I have to say borderline so I don't get sued. And he has no problem speaking out against those who don't follow the Republican mantra. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it's the way that he goes about doing that I find issue with. Enter in Derek Chauvin and the guilty verdict that was handed down to him by a jury of his peers. Oh boy, what could Tucker Carlson have to say about that? You ever hear the thing about what happens when two elements in the perfect storm thing, that scenario? The one that I can't think of right now because I'm on like 2 hours of sleep. Yeah, this poo's about to get real stinky.
Ed Gavin is a former deputy sheriff with the New York City Sheriff's Department. He joins us with his perspective on what this means for law enforcement. Ed Gavin, thanks so much for coming on tonight. Who's going to become a cop going forward, do you think?
Here we have the complete tool Carlson, obviously butthurt because a police officer was held accountable. Questioning former New York Deputy Sheriff Ed Gavin and the look on Gavin's face as he's posed with these ridiculous questions. Let's go ahead and start a counter for this one.
Well, I think people will still become police officers. This really is a learning experience for everyone. Let's face it, what we saw in that video was pure savagery. I mean, the documentary evidence showed the police officer putting his knee on the perpetrator's neck.
I think you mean victim's neck. Take a look at Carlson here. This is the usual face of confusion that he often wears because, you know, he's an idiot.
While he was rear cuffed and his stomach was on the ground, causing positional asphyxia. So what I'd like to see, Tucker, is I'd like to see more training for police. I'd like to see the police trained as EMTs, like in the fire department. Training
as EMTs is a good idea, but it doesn't focus on the real training that needs to happen with police officers. De-escalation.
For example, in the New York City Fire Department, we have firefighters that are EMTs. But who gets to the scene first in most of these situations? It's the police. So in reviewing the tape, what I noticed was that the police officer removed the subject, Mr. Floyd, from his vehicle, and he was able to handcuff him, and then he was able to seat him on the ground, and he was handcuffed. At that point, they should have left him there. You know, there was no reason to move him, and obviously, Mr. Floyd was he was emotionally disturbed. And at that point, you may want to say, "Hey, Mr. Floyd, let me take your pulse." Things of this nature, and we have to change the way we...
Yeah, providing basic mental health checks to someone who's being detained, who is obviously agitated or seemed a bit out of sorts is a really good idea. You can see that Carlson here has loads of issues with what this former officer has to say.
Deal with people. Now, I've used I've used force on literally over 500 people in my 21-year career in the New York City Department of Correction and in the New York City Sheriff's Department. I've never had anybody go unconscious. And, you know, that was clearly an excessive, unjustified use of force. I think the verdict was just. I think we had documentary evidence, we had testimonial evidence, and, you know, it was an open and shut case. But moving forward, what we need to do...
Sorry I keep stopping the video here, but I kind of have to, or else I won't be able to use fair use. Keep an eye on Carlson. He's about to start his usual condescending rhetoric.
in my opinion. We need to have.
How about enforce the law? Okay, do we need to do that? So hold on, wait. So slow down. Do we enforce the law? Like, let's say people are going through the windows in Macy's and the cops are just standing there. Do they resign
No.
because obviously their honor is being violated, but they're not doing anything about it? When do they start doing something about it and protecting everyone else, not just George Floyd?
The butthurt is strong with this one. This is a completely absurd question. And quite frankly, Fox News and Tucker Carlson should be ashamed of themselves for even entertaining such an absurd idea. Carlson here is so angry that a police officer who murdered someone was held accountable for his actions. So, obviously that means we no longer fight crime or seek justice, because black men got justice.
No. I want people to protect. I want the police to protect people. But when specifically what we're dealing with a person in custody who was handcuffed and he was subdued.
Right.
At that point, we have to take a different tack. And one of the things I just want to suggest, Tucker,
I'm totally willing to believe that. Yep.
No, you aren't. If you were, then why are you so out of sorts about Chauvin being held accountable for his illegal actions? Enjoying the show? Do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with all your friends. And if it's your first time here, consider subscribing, as it really does help my channel. Make sure you tickle that bell for bell notifications. That way you get notified every time I put out a video. It's a lot of fun. I love it when you do. Tickle my bell, baby. Tickle my bell. That didn't come out right. If you want to support the show monetarily, you can do so at several different ways. We have channel memberships, we have Patreon memberships, we've got merchandise, we've got PayPal links, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff will be in the link in the description below. And absolutely do not feel obligated to do so. I truly appreciate everybody who has and everybody who continues to support me monetarily. But again, this is a free channel. I want people to come and hang out with me on a daily basis. So feel free to stop by, leave me a like, leave me a comment. That's all the support I really need. I appreciate you. Anyway, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, the U.S. Department of Justice came out with a position paper on positional asphyxia and sudden death. It was published in 1995 and again in 1998. I think every law enforcement officer should read that. It should be read at roll calls. Because what it does, it talks about the physiology of a struggle. Now, like I said, Mr. Floyd was brought under control. What should have happened at that point is EMS should have been summoned and he should have been placed in an ambulance. And a supervisor should have been called to the scene. I just think that...
See, this is how you have a civilized conversation with someone who doesn't know how to do that. Gavin here keeps trying to redirect the interview back towards the point of the interview. And Carlson just keeps trying to derail it. Gavin makes some good points here, and instead of keeping along with what Gavin has to say, Carlson is too busy trying to redirect and push his bullshit agenda.
It was excessive, and it shouldn't happen. And what I'd like to see...
The guy who did it looks like he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. So I'm kind of more worried about the rest of the country, which, thanks to police inaction, in case you haven't noticed, is like boarded up. So that's more my concern. But I appreciate your coming on. Ed Gavin, thank you. Nope, done. Thank you.
No, Carlson. You are more interested in shoving your agenda down people's throats. This is not an instance of overreach by the justice system. This is actually what the justice system is supposed to do. Hold people accountable for their actions. Why are you so angry that this cop was convicted in a court of law? It's getting more and more difficult for you to hide your racism. Sorry, alleged racism. Do me a favor and keep your outrage about the boarded up rest of the country to yourself. We all know you're not living in those areas. So, one final time for the audience. And there you have it. Tucker Carlson is a giant piece of human poo who's only pissed because his white knight was convicted. Allegedly. For f***'s sake, man. Sorry for this one, folks. I saw this clip of Tucker Carlson and I just had to. I have not liked this guy for, I don't know, I can't stand this guy. He's a giant shit stain on the backside of the undershorts of the American people and probably on the taint of the world. Look, you want to be a Republican? That's perfectly okay with me. I support you. But getting behind some of the just flat out absurd, stupid shit that comes out of Tucker Carlson's mouth makes you guilty by association. That guy's a giant piece of human poo. If you believe what he has to say, or if you agree with him, that might make you one too. He's a vile human piece of poo, a dingleberry at its finest, or worst. Regardless, it's time to wipe him off the backside of the American anus and flush him down the toilet where he belongs. I'll pick a funny one next time, I promise. As always, I'm Johnny O, and don't forget, hey, speaking of finger guns, we've got a new finger guns shirt in the merch store. I'll leave a link in the description. That being said, finger guns, baby!